There's map booklet. All right. So what you guys got to see was just an idea. Again, these are what people are trying to fathom what it looked like from the descriptions we have over the next 8 chapters. Okay? We have, how many of you guys looked into the size differences? How many of you guys looked at the different designs? Okay. All right. Let's start. Shall we play a game with Google? Who's got? Let's do team 1, team 2, team 3 or so. So we go. Don't take up a lot of data. See if you can find any sort of square meterage difference between Herod's temple and Ezekiel's temple. Okay? While you guys are doing that, we need to understand something about temple before we get into this. All right? What was the first sort of picture we have of a temple idea? Mishkan. Okay, so the tabernacle. Okay? And with the tabernacle, we saw 3 parts, right? 3 parts. We had what's in it?
Outer court, holy place,
Okay, basically, design, it looked like that. 1 door, another door, once you're inside, and then you have the parochet, so the Holy of Holies, the holy place, and the outer court. Okay? Any guesstimations on how big that tabernacle is?
can't tell you, previous conflict.
We're looking at the first one, the tabernacle. Not temples yet, but the first picture of where we get temple from is tabernacle, right? The tent that Moses built.
I've got a measurement for Herod's tabernacle at 180 feet wide.
That's just the temple, but the whole complex.
The whole complex.
Check out the whole complex. Okay? If you look at the tabernacle, you're basically looking at not much bigger than these 2 rooms combined. Okay? Not much bigger. From the door, coming in past the altar, come past the laver. Once you get into the laver, you've got, probably if you're looking at that wall, probably till about here, where you would have the menorah, the altar of incense, and the table of showbread. And then you would step into this section, probably about 4 full steps, and that's the Holy of Holies. Extremely small. Okay? Now remember, if you've got 22,000 Levites, give or take, where do you put them? And it's not enough, right? If you have got these guys, they're working in shifts and they're rotating, but the point of this is we've got a 3-part design, okay? From there, who was the next guy to have the great idea to upgrade the tabernacle? No. David. Remember? David came in and then God told him, your hands are full of blood, my boy. I really like the idea, but let's face it, you building a house for me, that's cute. I'm not going to fit it into a little box, but I won't let you do it because I know your heart, but I'm going to let Solomon do it. So we call it Solomon's Temple. David collected a whole bunch of stuff, basically prepared everything for his son to come in, and then he built it. Okay? So our next pick will be Solomon's Temple. Okay? Same 3 parts, but slight differences. Solomon liked his bling. How many menorahs in the first one? 1. How many menorahs in the second, in the temple? 10. right? Easy way to remember it is 70 lights. Okay? Some people believe that's a number for every nation. Out of the 70 nation, one light for each nation. Okay? So 10 times 7, 70. And then he had 10 tables of showbread. Still, only one Ark of the Covenant. Okay. So he enlarged it and he made it much grander, and he built it on which area? Still had 3 parts. This one was built in the wilderness. This one was built on Mount Moriah.
Yes.
Mount Zion is actually one hill on Mount Moriah. Jerusalem itself is actually comprised of 7 different hills. So sometimes it refers to Zion. In Zion, your word will come out of Zion, etc., etc. It's talking about Jerusalem, but that's only one hill. You can go stand on Mount Zion and still not be standing on Temple Mount. Okay? So Mount Moriah is where we understand it to be. Another word for that is Zion. Now, what happened to Solomon's temple?
Destroyed. They came in.
By who? By who?
Antiochus?
Say again?
Antiochus.
No. No.
Was it? I thought they did Herod's component.
And the
Was
Romans.
it Babylon?
No, it was the Babylonians, the first destruction. Babylonians. Babylonians. All right. Later, after the Babylonians destroyed, everybody's in exile. Remember, Ezekiel's in exile right now, right? While he's writing these things. So when he gets spirited up to Jerusalem and he sees this fantastic temple, remember, he was a Levite. He was supposed to be in the temple, but they got it wrong. Correct? So when the Persians come in after Cyrus beats Babylon, he sends out a decree to go back and rebuild. Yes? And he sets people free. And he says, go do this. And you know what? In fact, guys, we'll pay for it. The revenue I'm collecting from the area of Judea, we're going to use that to pay for your temple. Not only am I going to give you your land back, I'm going to give you money to go rebuild Jerusalem. I'm going to give you money to rebuild your temple. And that was all decreed 400 years before Cyrus was even born. Okay? Remember, it's a very interesting portion in Isaiah that God says, we're going to have a competition. Your gods versus my gods. Do they know what's going to happen? Well, I tell you, I will call Cyrus, and he's literally called the Mashiach, the anointed one. Okay? I'm going to call my anointed one up, and they named him Cyrus, and he's going to do X, Y, and Z. Okay? It happened 400 years before Cyrus was even born. It was decreed. And it's quite an interesting backstory. How many of you remember what we understand about Cyrus's life? His grandfather tried to kill him because there was a prophecy about him that he was going to be greater than him. And they took him and they ran him off. And where did he go and stay? I don't need names, I need positions. What was the people's occupation?
He was a shepherd. He was raised as a shepherd.
Right. So just it's sort of like an interesting picture by King David, don't you think? You know, the shepherd gets lifted up and he becomes more powerful than the guy before him. You have a King Saul who tried to kill Cyrus, the shepherd boy, and you've got your granddaddy trying to kill King Cyrus, and you've got Saul trying to kill David. That's a very interesting little parallel. Okay? So anyway, Cyrus sends them back, and under Zerubbabel, they build what we call Zerubbabel's temple. Okay? Zerubbabel's temple. Right. So destroyed, comes back. They remember the grandeur, the opulence of King Shlomo himself, and the wealthiest and wisest man of them all. And then they come back, and after many battles, spiritual things, where if you look at Zechariah, is an interesting chapter where they call the name Josiah or Joshua, probably better translated as Yeshua. Came in, and Zechariah saw him dressed in a linen cloth, pure white. And you saw what could be described as Hasatan throwing gunk at him, defiling his cloak, making him all dirty, making it look like he was impure. It wasn't coming from within out, it was coming from outside in. And God orders for them to get this high priest new garments. And he says, I'm going to finish what I started, what I've declared. And he refers to Zerubbabel as a branch. I've anointed him to go do a work. And he's going to rebuild my house. Okay? It's interesting because he uses a specific image. Any of you remember what that image was? It came up when we studied the two witnesses in Revelations. Fastest fingers first. Anybody want to quickly scan through Zechariah? No? Look in the table of contents to find Zechariah. What image did they use to describe Zerubbabel and high priest? It was a branch and an olive branch and a... Yeah, that's Aaron's stuff.
Oh, lampstand.
A menorah. Right, a menorah. Then he goes, okay, now I'm going to anoint these guys. They're going to go and do my work, and they're going to reestablish my house. I find that very interesting because when you look at the two witnesses, similar pictures, right? And there's going to be people that are going that are going to be establishing God's house, his kingdom, right? Okay. So after they built Zerubbabel's temple, they were not extremely happy. They actually mourned it because it was so small. But they got over themselves, they carried on. Now remember, Ezekiel's vision happens before Zerubbabel's temple is built. Right. Okay. So some people have an indication or an idea that it was supposed to be there. But I'm just going to explain to you a little bit why that's a bit of a problem. Okay? Let me just... Yeah. I want to teach you what Solomon's in here. Okay. Oh, there we go. There's a good one. Right. So when you start to look at these things, okay, Solomon's temple, yes? Yes. All right. Normally, a quick indicator is gold pillars, but this is normally the dead people. Okay, if you're looking at it from the outside, they call that the brass sea. He put that over 12 oxen. Okay? Part of his design, as he did, which areas of scripture do you find it as a description of Solomon's temple? I'll pass this around. This is what it looked like. Internal. I don't know if that's going to help. So inside the temple, the dedication of the temple is around 1 Kings 20, if I remember correctly. Okay, but in 1 Kings, Solomon's temple, 1 Kings chapter 6 and 7, the dedication is around 20, if I remember correctly. And it goes into the details on that. Obviously, Torah is very much the case for the Mishkan in many chapters. The tabernacle is mentioned. Just trying to give you comparative size and design. Okay. So we go from this to that. Right? Set up in Jerusalem. Zerubbabel's temple we don't really have much of a depiction of because it wasn't really spoken of in the word. So we don't really have much of a design, but we know they mourned it wasn't as grand as Solomon's. Okay? From there, enter a guy called Herod the Great, just before the time of Yeshua. Now, Herod the Great, he was called the Great because he was a master builder, but he was also a master nutter. Okay? He was the guy who liked to kill his own children. You don't understand. He strangled his favorite wife because someone said she might have had an affair. He had no proof, but he killed herself. Killed himself. Right? Miriam. Same sort of MO. We see him entering the story. This is the same Herod that, remember when Yeshua was born and then the wise men came, right? And then he said, well, the story went, tell me where he is so I can find him, so I can go worship him as well. And the wise men were warned in a dream and they went via. And what did Herod do? When he realized they weren't coming back, he back calculated more or less and he said, any children under 2 years old? Pharaoh, Moses, Herod, Yeshua. There are many parallels. When he says when Moses says in Torah, well, God tells him that someone will come like Moshe. There will be the prophet that comes. And even today we understand that the Jews understand it to be a messianic thing. When you do the parallel between Moses and Yeshua, you understand fully how we came. Okay, I'm not going to go into that tonight.
Next year's best of teaching.
Angle number 47. Anyway, Herod the Great comes in and he sees, all right, well, he's not a very liked man, but he needs to gather favor. So one of the ways he does that is he marries a Hasmonean princess by the name of Miriam, the same lady that I just mentioned to you that got strangled. Hasmonean meant she was in power before the Romans came. They were part of this royal lineage after Judah the Maccabean and established temple worship and all those things and cleaned out all the rest of it after Antiochus defiled the temple. So he said, I want to be a favorite, but Herod's got a dark past. Herod got pushed into power by his father, who was an Edomian. Think of Edom. Okay, a man by the name of Antipater. Now, Antipater got them in, and he was very good at working with the Romans. And as the Romans were coming up, he was seeing who was going to be more powerful, and he got in there early and started backing people. Sometimes he got it wrong, but he managed to wriggle out of it and cozy up to the new person who was in power. But the point is, he's got his sons in power overlooking the area of Judea. Okay? Now, what happened is when Judah the Maccabean that came up and brought this revolt against the Greeks. Okay? Rome obviously was establishing their power hold and all the rest of it with them. But Fazael, Herod's brother, was coming up and being in control of these things. And because the Greeks and the Romans are very similar, we need to get rid of them. They did exactly what Antiochus did. Convert or die. Forced conversion from a Jewish perspective. We always hear about it from, when the Crusades got it wrong. When Spanish Inquisitions and all these other funny things were the persecution of the Jews. Here we find the Jews were the persecutors of the surrounding territories. They revolted, they got hold of Fazael, they killed him. And then they went up and all the rest of it, and then they forced other people to convert. Herod fled for his life in many cases, but he never forgot what they did, gathered backing from Rome again, came back 10 times as strong. But through that whole conversion process that happened a little while before he started coming up the man, he was half Jew, half Edomite. Now picture the internal struggle of what's going on here. Half Esau, half Jacob. Okay? I'll serve God, I'll eat kosher, but I'll kill you if you come in, you cut across my path. And this is what we see he does. But because he's trying to gather favor, he comes up, he knows the Jews are very sensitive and touchy about this temple scenario, and he goes, listen, I've been to Rome. We have money. Let me show you a temple. We don't trust you. He says, what's going to show you my faith? You're going to tear it down and you're going to say, you're never going to rebuild it. So he says, no, I'll tell you what. I will get 70% of the building materials, cut stone, everything up into the base of the mountain there before I take off a single stone from your temple. So they agree. And he goes in and he breaks down Zerubbabel's temple. So Zerubbabel's temple wasn't destroyed, it was modified. But the modification meant leveling it. Herod, being Herod, had a couple of problems. The mountain does that sort of scenario. Temple is there. But I want it bigger. So what does Herod do?
TNT.
Yeah, TNT. He starts cutting in on one side and he starts building up on the other. Okay? So he does this. He goes, you're not going to need that. What we're going to do is we're going to build a retaining wall there. We're going to cut into it and we're going to get this the same height. And we're going to build what they call Temple Mount platform. Old temple is gone. Sections of the mountain have been chipped away. And that platform is what you see a section of the Western Wall today. When I say retaining wall, we're talking about this thing here. All right? So he built up in sections, cut away in sections so he could build a nice big flat platform for them to build. All right? It was around 46 years for him to build this. Okay? It was, check me. Scripture says it was like Yeshua still said, destroy this temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days. And they answered it was like 46 years it took for our fathers to build this place, and you're going to destroy it and build it up in 3 days. So it gives us a timeline. The temple was only finished really after Herod died, but he got most of the construction done. Okay? And he built this area here, which we fondly call today Temple Mount. Temple Mount is just the retaining wall all around, and that western wall section that you see on the western side of the retaining wall is literally probably 1/8, or about 1/6 of the retaining wall, and only the top third that is sticking out the ground. So our road does this. The retaining wall is like that. So where the guys are praying, they're praying in a section about that size and only seeing the top third of the wall. 46 years. So we really don't fully comprehend the size of this. And to give you an indication, there are stones in the retaining wall that were about 12 meters up in the air that weighed between 560 to 640 tons. One stone. When I say 560 to 640, 680, somewhere around there, it varies on the thickness of the wall. So we don't know how thick the stone is. They take it at the smallest stone they found, which is 11 foot thick. It could be 16, could be 18 foot thick. Now that wasn't on the ground. Like I said, that was around 12 meters up, and it's in a single piece. Today, that would be a struggle without cranes, without technology. To show that it wasn't a fluke, they put one next to it that weighed 20 ton less. You literally stand at one end. It's probably from the back wall. Yeah, about here. From the back of the wall till about here. And one stone from about here going down to the bottom of the flat. That's one.
Taller than 2 meters.
And they picked it up 12 meters in the air and they placed it so neat and so tidy that you couldn't take a piece of paper and slide it in between the gap of the stone next to it. And they still laid it a couple of millimeters in to keep with the building construction. Okay? You're starting to get an indication of why they call it here the Great, right? So as he built this platform, cutting into the mountain, he gave us, how big was Herod's Temple Mount platform? All right. So Herod's Temple. Square meters. 12,000 by 12,000 by 12,000 by 12,000. 12 by 12. Okay? I think someone put in a perspective of something along the lines of 12 football fields stacked next to each other. It is. All right? This thing is absolutely ginormous. So you've got it there somewhere. All right, so that's just the platform that he put into place. Now, this is the temple Yeshua walked in and out of. That one was, what happened to that? Herod's Temple?
Romans.
Rome.
Destroyed.
Destroyed by Rome, 70 AD. This one was around the time of 586 BC.
Mine was 144,000. Size of 20 football.
20 football fields. Yeah. Okay. Little, bigger, less. Biggest temple known to man at the time. It outdid Rome's temples. People traveled from all over the world to see this temple. It's huge. Even now, when you go into Jerusalem today, if you stand on the Mount of Olives, there's buildings, 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 and there's this massive platform where they put the Dome of the Rock. This massive, massive, massive platform that runs across. And that whole thing was that Temple Mount. Okay? That's just the top half. The staircases and that go down on the other side. The mikvahs, the baptismal baths, going down into that. Okay? And that ran into David's city. All right? I wanted to share something with you. Okay. Now there's something interesting about Herod's temple before we get onto the measurements of Ezekiel's. Is Herod took quite meticulous care to build a level platform. He cut into the mountain, he flattened it out, he did everything that he wanted to do, right? In the temple, oh, not today, in that region, we've got this funny little round shaped thing. It's got a gold roof on it. What do we call that?
Dome.
The Dome of the?
Rock.
Dome of the Rock. Why do we call it the Dome of the Rock?
There's a rock in there.
Because there's the top of the mountain is sticking out in it here. All right? You used to be able to go in and you can do like a little internet thing where you can look at photos. They've taken photos all around until one Okie walked in there and he was strapped with bombs. They decided that was not a good idea anymore, so they don't let people in. But it's called the Dome of the Rock for the reason, because there's a big rock in it. Now, Islam will tell you that Muhammad left to go up into heaven from Jerusalem, and they believe that's the place. That's why the Al-Aqsa Mosque is right there. Okay? Can that be found anywhere in the Quran? No, it's written nowhere. Doesn't exist. So with some sort of tradition, many people believe it's just to control Temple Mount so that the Jews can't build their temple. God uses whatever and whenever to try and control situations. I smile and wave. My question. If Herod built this retaining wall, chopped into the mountain, flattened sections, put those massive stones in, put a level across 20 football fields, you missed something. Now, you don't really see that. Where do you see the big part of the mountain sticking up?
Could it be the altar because the facility had to be of uncut stone?
No, because the old days and uncut stone, it didn't mean make it out of the mountain piece, right? You still had to build a ramp and you still had to build a point. Some people believe they built the altar over it. Because remember, the ramp and everything had to be, but in the beginning it was what type of altar? Brazen. Okay? So some people believe there was stone and they built over it. Why would you put an altar over there?
Special.
It's a pretty rock. We spent all those many hours, many years chipping away, building, flattening, doing all the rest of it, and then we leave that piece so we can stick something over it to hide it. What is it about this rock, the top of the mountain, that Herod wanted to keep?
I don't know if it's right, but I heard something that they believe that's where Jacob had the dream, or that's where Abraham wanted to sacrifice Isaac.
Second one, Mount Moriah. When Abraham took Isaac, and Isaac carried a piece of wood on his back, and he went up with two people, one on his left, one on his right. He went up with the father, all the way to the top of the mountain, allowed himself to be bound, allowed himself to be put down. The father's trust that he had a promise, the promised son, that was going to be the father of many nations, because it was through Abraham, through Yitzhak. Right? So a belief of resurrection that was going to happen in a place that later got called Yireh Shalom. Otherwise, modern day, today called Jerusalem. God will provide peace. How will he provide peace? Through an offering of a father and a son. Remember, Yeshua said, no one takes my life, I lay down my life willingly. His trust in the Father to be bound. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Lord, if there's any other way, but not my will, yours be done. He carried the wood on his back, just as Yeshua carried the cross beam on his back. He was flanked by two witnesses. You see two people going up, two servants going up with Abraham and Isaac. And we get to the place where a loving father is willing to lay down his son. And we see that played out again. We know with Abraham and Yitzhak, he says, stop. I know you don't love anything more than that boy or that man. He was about the age of 30 at the time. He says, but not him. The ram that was stuck in a thicket. Thick bush around his head. Trapped, caught. Crown of thorns maybe. It's a nice picture. And he says, to the one I choose, that is the one you're going to do that. And we see that imagery come up with Yeshua, we see it come up with Pesach, we see it come up with the scapegoat, we see it in all the different feasts and those ideas, right? It's an interesting thing for me that he left that rock. Now, some people again believe that maybe that was where the altar was over. So we can say that was an altar of offering, so it makes sense. And it was normally brazen, bronze, had to do with judgment. The horns were pointed away according to what the tabernacle picture was. Horns represent strength. Through God's strength, his judgment will be turned away. And that will bring you in to God. Now remember, when you look at the pictures, you go in, you go through a door, Yeshua is the door. You deal with your sin, your offering, he's our offering. You go wash your hands from the blood in the laver, you get mikvat, you get sprinkled clean. You go in, and on your left-hand side is the menorah. Gold has to do with righteousness. You see God's spirit with 7 facets, or what people call the 7 spirits of God, Isaiah 11. On the right, I'm the light of the world. On the right, table of showbread, the bread for the priests, I'm the bread of life. And just before is an interesting little discrepancy in our Bibles. It says that from Torah perspective, the altar of incense is just outside of the Holy of Holies, the separation. From Hebrews, it says it's inside. Okay? So from the book of Hebrews, it says it's actually inside the Holy of Holies. You know me, I like to marry things. I don't believe they contradict each other. The way to get through from one point, remember, he used to go in through prayer. Yeshua mediates, right? Through his blood, we're allowed to go in. And the high priest himself, once a year when he went through, it says he would have to take incense and smoke, and it would go up before him because God would sit there, right? So through prayer, through Yeshua, we step from the holy place into the Holy of Holies. So it's, again, sort of like a gateway. So it's not just outside, but it also leads us inside to the very presence where we have the Ark of the Covenant. And how was the Ark described? The lead head. Okay, one on the left, one on the right, and the platform, the section in the middle is called what? Mercy seat. Why is it called the mercy seat? Why is it called the mercy seat? Because that's where God sits. Every vision you see of him in heaven is flanked by 2 angels. It was a picture of his throne. And the image again is that the ketubah, or the 10 commandments, the marriage contract, is underneath where he sits. The point of keeping a ketubah was, I'm going to take it to my safe place. And I'm going to hold it so close. Who's going to steal out of God's house? This one's fine. Okay? That section there. Okay, now you will notice in most people's depictions of the ark, the poles are actually going that way. Okay, that's probably incorrect because you don't carry God sideways. Okay, moving along. The poles were, as he went forward, God on his throne would be carried forward. Okay? So I'll pass that around so you guys can get a better look. Okay, so that could be there. Some people believe because something went missing in between that one and that one. What went missing? The Ark of the Covenant. Okay? Some people believe Solomon was very clever, and there's very interesting theories about this, with special platforms and chains and hidden floors and all the rest of it. Would go down into Temple Mount itself to be hidden for a time. Some people believe it was smuggled out. Some people believe it's found. Ron White is one guy who believed that it was found. Some people believe it was smuggled to Ethiopia. Lots of different theories. Okay? The simple fact of the matter is, in Herod's temple, we had no Ark of the Covenant. Interesting. when Yeshua comes for Pesach and he offers himself as a groom to the bride, and he reiterates the same wedding supper at Sinai, that God did at Sinai, he does at Passover. And he establishes the same ketubah in a time when the Ark of the Covenant was no longer there.
So then what was in the 100 virgins?
Nothing. Some people believe it's a rock.
But now, so when the high priest had to go into the holy of holies once a year, where would he put the blood?
Maybe on the rock? No. Can you fulfill the all of those requirements? No, because if we don't have the ark, what can we do? But we wanted a house. God sent us here to rebuild the temple. He anointed Zerubbabel and Yeshua or Joshua or Josiah, depending on your translation, to come in and establish his house and rebuild it. Here we have Yeshua establishing his house, but not the kingdom of made by human hands again, but the kingdom of heaven dynamic. Right? Because just because these temples were destroyed, did that mean, well, let me rewind a little bit. Where did Moses get the blueprint for this? For the tabernacle? Right. It says, what he saw, he tried to copy. Hence the cherubim. Said, good luck even with your artistic flair trying to capture that sort of creature with all different things going on there with those depictions. But you get to the place now where you look at that, you copy it down, blueprint after blueprint, blueprint after blueprint. We're coming here, we want to establish that, but we're missing something. Didn't stop them. Now that was destroyed. Nothing of the temple was left. As Yeshua said, look carefully at these stones, not one will be left on top of another. When Rome was finished sacking everything, it was literally just a retaining wall that was left. Okay? Let me show you what they did. All right. So, you guys are following? Okay. So, retaining walls up into that point, all of those columns and everything else, gone. We have floor. We found piece of stones. We found stones fallen, pulled over on one side. When you go to Israel, there's something called the Southern Wall excavations. We found mass load of tonnage of stones that were thrown down from the top, and the small dent they made in the pavements. Let's just say big block about the size of this table, and this is a small stone about yay high, levered and tossed off while people are running across a street because the shops were down there. All right, we know from the historians that Josephus recorded that he said they didn't want to set fire to the temple. It happened by accident. So what happened was, once it started to set fire on the inside, this golden crown that he had on top started, the stone started to heat up and it started to melt. Started to melt down into stones. All the gold in it was melting into the stones. So how do I loot it?
Pick up the stone.
Break stone, chip off gold. Stone, gold. Stone, gold. Not one stone will be left on top of another. It's a very interesting depiction that they were flogging off stones from the top just to loot those things. And like I said to you before, the looting of this temple, which really had nothing on Solomon's, paid for the Colosseum to be built, amongst other things, right? So they got lots of gold. They got lots of stuff from that, okay? So all of that section flattened. You know, we found there's stones all over the place. But anyway, when you go there, you get to see they've actually left a section of the stones when they were digging to try and find the pavement and find out how deep it actually went down. They left a piece for us to give us an inclination of the destruction there. Now, it was very interesting because you think stones, fire, not really going to do anything major, right? But people actually died by shrapnel than anything else. what happens is because limestone is a bit porous, water gets in behind the first layers, and when fire starts to get up, burning whatever merchandise and all the rest of it, the stone heats up the water that's hiding behind it, and it gets to boiling point, and it goes, and it shoots off shrapnel and takes out people. You see on that same little street, on the faces of the shops, sections there where the stones have literally been shot off from the heat. Okay? It's very depressing, but it's very interesting. Right. So you get to this place, and we get Herod's Temple. Okay, now, what did you find? Compare size with Herod's Temple to what Ezekiel's Temple.
4 times around.
Okay? Do you guys concur?
According to that first video, it was a little bit small.
No, well, it is actually much bigger. It's just the way they designed it. Right, that's why she went on to the whole thing. When you look at the allotment of land as well as, there's no way it's actually going to fit on Temple Mount at the moment, which is interesting because what we call the third temple, which is actually the fourth, which is about 1, 2, there should be 3, but because it was not destroyed, it's called the second temple period. And now third temple period is the one they want to build. Do yourself a favor, go to a place or online, look at the Temple Institute. I don't know if you guys did this. Is there Jude? All right, those are the guys that are rebuilt the clothing, the menorah. They've got Levites in training already. They've put a whole bunch of things together. They're ready to go. All they need is the building. They've got the stuff for the building, but they want the platform. Right? But something about World War III and all that, that's kind of stopping them from doing it. They have already developed and designed a temple and started bringing in stuff accordingly. Now, if Ezekiel's Temple, if you look at those measurements, doesn't fit on Temple Mount, it's too big. And this one does. Where does Ezekiel's temple fit in? Right. So when we start to look at this, we've got a couple of questions that we have to nail down. Okay? Different schools of thought. Number 1. He was a good bug. Moments of silence. Okay, now let's move. All right. When we get to this place now, we've got to check. All right. Is this allegorical? Is it just a vision with some sort of understanding of a figurative temple for you to look at? And there's a verse that you guys will come across when you read from chapter 40 to 48. That he says, Son of man, show them this vision of the temple. Give them the measurements if their hearts cry out, if they commit teshuvah, and they want it, and they get the design. Show them those things, and that'll bring them further into teshuvah, or show them that they're being wicked and that they need to be changed. Okay, I think that happens in 41, around 40, 41 there. So maybe it's a picture of, listen, this wasn't actually meant to be built, but it was an image of a temple of something you could have had. But because of your hardness and heart, you will never have it. It's a possibility. 8 chapters of cubits and measurements and things, though. Priests, laws, feast, festival mentions, people who are sitting at different gates. All that for an allegory might be a bit much for some people. The second part is, which the Jews have a massive thing, and we say, no, we're literalists. If God says build a temple, he's not talking about some figurative temple. He's talking about actual temple. When Christ said, or Paul said, don't you know that you are the temple of God, a temple plural. Each one of us is a stone. holding up into God's house. What type of image is he giving us? Why would he say something like that? What is your interpretation of what he's saying?
Function.
Comes back down to Shavuot. At Mount Sinai, Shekhinah happened. The very presence of God poured out, yes? All Israel heard him, all Israel saw him. Tongues of fire. We saw that same thing move from the mountain to the tabernacle. Much later. Inside the tabernacle, who lit the first, the judgment altar? Only God. How? Through fire. The Shekhinah came in and it lifted up when it needed to be moved, and then it resettled. Right? From the tabernacle to the temple, after Solomon's prayer and dedication, that same fire descended, the Shekhinah came down and sat in the temple. From the temple to the Jews in Acts 2. From there, Acts 8
Of Jews.
and 10. Everyone else, I say everyone else who believed. Not just everybody who doesn't believe. Stating the obvious just in case we get confused. So he moved from a mountain to the Mishkan, from the Mishkan to the temple, from the temple to the people. Agreed? You are the temple. The same Holy Spirit that was there at Sinai, who gave you the instructions and the abilities to build the tabernacle. To Moshe, Aaron, Bezalel, and Oliab. Enabled Solomon and his builders and craftsmen from all over the world to come and do the same thing. In that temple, we see that same picture come down into same description in Acts 2 on the Yehudi first and then to the Gentile after.
Tongues of fire.
We mention it every Shavuot. It's the same portion, same pictures. At Pentecost, this is what happened. Okay? So, if that's part of our logic, where do we as the temple fit in as well to this? And then we've got Revelations. We'll also give you a depiction of some stuff. Right. So if we're literalists, if we believe you've given us cubits for a purpose, and the purpose of those cubits are to build something, 8 chapters of extremely fun reading, will lead us to a portion around chapter 43, where it talks about offerings in the temple. Right, not just any offerings, sin offerings. If we have Yeshua, why is there a sin offering? And if we couldn't build this up until that time, where does this fit in if it's a literal temple? And if it is a literal temple, why do we have offerings? You see, for most of us, it's easy to put this in as millennial reign. The start of millennial reign, where Christ comes down for 1,000 years and rules. Not to be confused with what we will dub, without offending any people, Antichrist's temple. Let me not say Antichrist temple because I don't really. Antichrist hijack of temple. Right, I know people out there, they have a very, 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 very dim view of temple. Don't want to go to the temple. The temple is bad. The temple is where the Antichrist is. The temple. That's not the temple. He's going to cause the abomination that causes desolation. According to Daniel, that means he's going to set up, either slaughter a pig on the altar, either burn Torah, or declare himself to be a god. They put a bust of Zeus in the Holy of Holies and they said, there's your God. He says he's going to come up and he's going to set up and he's going to say, I am God. Worship me. Problematic. So he's going to go in and he's going to try and hijack something that God had instituted. And then later, we see some interesting little things. So when Yeshua comes to reign, do we have evidence, since we've never built this and couldn't build this up until the time? Now, please, let's be careful. Were there things in the tabernacle that they knew how to build perfectly before they built it?
Spirit and everything.
No, the menorah, for instance, is still a problem for us today. According to their size, and it wasn't a big menorah, it was probably about yay big, because it was made out of pure gold. No matter which way you build it, even today, for something that size, gold is just too soft. So it keeps on folding. The weight of it is too big. We don't know how Bezalel did it, or Moshe, or Aaron, depending on what understanding or where you want to see who built what. It's interesting how certain images overlap or certain verses overlap when you do the building. But when you look at it, we still don't know how they did it. Today, the menorah that they built now, 20th century, gold plated. Stands taller than me, but not pure gold. Impossible to do. So, are we saying that God cannot, if he enabled them from there to build Ezekiel's temple? Should we have to wait till the 20th century to do that? No. But clearly, this temple has never been built yet. We have all these other temples and all these other images of temples. We don't even have this one yet, but all the plans we have fit onto Temple Mount, and it's just, when Ezekiel's temple is like 4 to 6 times the size, we are going to have to blast most of Jerusalem, or a big section of Jerusalem, just so we can fit the building in. It's something like 1.5 miles by 1.5 miles. 3 kilometers by 3 kilometers. Let me put that into perspective. Ancient Jerusalem is 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers. So you would literally have to flatten most of old city Jerusalem to build one temple. Okay, the problem is when you walk Jerusalem, you realize step. You know, when you're going down, you're going towards the temple. You're going towards Temple Mount, and even then, you're standing on top and you overlook it when you get close. Now, if I have to lift that up and I have to build it to fit everything in, I'm going to have to raise Temple Mount probably a thumb suck at about maybe 14 meters, 13 meters, 14 meters, and I'm going to have to build a platform over everything we have to be able to put that in Old City today. Problem is, big problem. So it doesn't fit. Temple Institute plans fit. Herod's temple, it was big enough then, but it would be big enough for us now. They just want a temple. Hence the reason it has to be built out in the Judean wilderness, and it overlaps because there's no way in Jerusalem that it's actually going to fit.
So where temple institute fit there?
Well, they actually modeled it, for the most part, it looks very, very similar to this. Very similar. So they're just going back to Herod's design and saying, guys, that was fantastic. People came from all over the world to see this, and they just figured there's a few modern tweaks to it. But you're basically looking at exactly the same thing. If I remember correctly, it was to the crown itself. So they're just going back there. They're using those designs and they're saying, guys, that's fantastic, we'll establish this thing. Okay? But again, if this is millennial, Sacrifices? It's an offering?
People also didn't believe that he was the Messiah.
If he's reigning, millennial reign, and he still says, okay, we'll go back to the Levitical system. How does it correlate with what we understand in Revelations?
In Revelations, it was also a sacrifice, the lamb being sacrificed in heaven. Was that not then?
He was the Lamb. It says, behold the Lamb of God. He was already in heaven.
So John
He wasn't being sacrificed. He was a picture of the sacrificed lamb so they could identify what he was doing.
Revelation 5.
Okay?
In Revelation 21 and 22 speaks of
Talks about New Jerusalem.
yes.
But it says there will be no temple because the Lamb will be the temple.
And that's it.
That's so big. Some people believe it's going to float up in the sky because it's so big that it doesn't fit anywhere near. When you look at the depictions, I just want you guys to get your mind thinking a bit. Okay? With the sacrificial system, how does it do? Is it a memorial? So something that people will do to remind us of the sacrifice of what Yeshua did, if it is a millennial temple. Do we have any sort of imagery about, as much as the sacrificial system pointed forward to Christ from Torah, and Abraham and Isaac were foreshadows, do we have evidence of offerings in that pointing backwards?
Yes.
How?
For me to come here tonight was sacrifice.
No. Actual sacrifice.
Isn't it? Just a thought that came to me while you were talking earlier, and then when you mentioned that now, I thought that's rather interesting because everything he does for man, he makes it easy to get to know him. Backwards, forwards, he's from everlasting to everlasting. Everything existed, and we came in, we're sitting into this little picture place, and now he wants to make it easy for us, and he keeps on giving us little things.
Give me a biblical example of a sacrifice pointing back.
I did think of it, and I just
Yeah, the hamsters.
I'm going to get about.
Huh?
To me, it doesn't make sense.
I don't want your nonsense. I'm asking, I want to answer.
The reason why I'm struggling is because God's trying to, if we look at that cycle, God's trying to bring us back to the garden of Eden when there wasn't any there. So why would we unnecessarily kill an animal if we have a sacrifice already?
Absolutely. But if we haven't been able to do this, and the only timeline it really fits is millennial reign, which it does. Because when he comes with New Jerusalem at the end, there is no temple. And all of the old creation is going to pass away, and he's going to establish the new heaven, new earth with New Jerusalem. No temple required, no sun required.
Could it be that the Jews in that time are recognizing that Yeshua is the Messiah and they actually partaking in sacrifices we are right now?
Okay, so you're saying that they might need it. Can we back anything up that with scripture? Yes, we can. Let me help you. Zechariah talks about people, if you study Zechariah 12 to 14, it talks about in the time of Sukkot, when Yeshua is reigning, the people who do not celebrate Sukkot tabernacles, when they come up, well, if they refuse to come up, they will get no rain. So it's funny for me that even at the time when he's reigning, we still have rebellion. What offering do they have? What covers their sin? Is it possible that it could be this? Possible? But let me take you back to my previous question. Do we have something that points back as a memorial? All of your answers should say yes. You're going to celebrate it in a couple of days. Is this the Passover lamb that you're celebrating? Are you remembering a sacrifice by eating lamb? Absolutely.
And so, in other words, when we're getting into the place when everything is back into order, as it should be, Garden of Eden style.
Should be, but then we're talking about Revelations. Guys, when you study this, I'm going to give you some time. You've got 3 weeks. You are going to look at and you're going to pick apart Revelations 21 and 22.
Chapters.
Yeah. 21 and 22. You are going to cross-reference this with Ezekiel 42, chapter 48. You are also going to look at Zechariah. Okay, to give you a bit of an indication, I think it's chapter 2, where he takes him and he says, I'm going to give you a rod and you're going to measure Jerusalem. And you're going to compare the measurements that we have. So Revelations 21, 22, Ezekiel 40 to 48, and Zechariah 2. If you're going to look a bit of millennial reign scriptures, you're going to have to go dig in Isaiah. You're going to have to go dig in Zechariah 12, 13, and 14. And I want you to look at the different imagery we have. Guys, this is not a little topic, but it's something you need to understand, something you need to get into. If you're not going to get anything out of this, if we're not going to resolve when Ezekiel's temple, just like we probably will never resolve the actual design of the temple, at least we will have a better idea of what he's talking about here. You would have looked at Revelations. Now remember, from a Jewish point of view, he's going to look at you and he goes, Ezekiel's temple. When do you think that's going to happen? Why are there sacrifices for sin? Isn't Yeshua your sacrifice? You see. You say, thank you very much. There's a sin offering there. You guys don't know what you're talking about. Yeshua is an idol. Guys, you have made him out to be God. Case closed. Shut. Is a well-known rabbi who loves terrorizing people. And this is one of his left hooks. Show me where your Yeshua is here. It's never been built, so it must be future. If it is future, you say Yeshua fulfilled the sacrificial system. Sin offerings, yes? Then why then in the Tanakh, according to Ezekiel the prophet, you believe he was a prophet, yes? Absolutely. Why then is the sin offering system not done away?
It's every offering. It's the sin, it's the guilt, it's the peace, it's the burnt, and it's the grain.
Absolutely.
Ezekiel's Temple.
In many cases, you've got to come to a conclusion where the old covenant versus the new covenant scenario comes into play with this. You've got to look at the old system transferred into the new system, Galatians 3 and Colossians 2. And you can, if you want to, go look into the idea of sons of Abraham. Is it spiritual or literal? From where we're coming from? And if we're looking at the priests, what does 1 Peter 2 really talk about? If we're supposed to be a kingdom of priests, where are we in Ezekiel's millennial reign? In Ezekiel's temple with millennial reign. Where do we fit in if we're the temple? Where does Ezekiel's fit in if we're the temple? Where does Revelations fit in if he says there's no temple? Confused?
No, thank you.
Challenge.
Very nice.
So confusing me is that isn't it when Yeshua reigns in millennial reign and comes down on the Mount of Olives, like splits? But wouldn't the Jews then recognize him as the Messiah because they see him as the king and he's coming as the king?
Yeah, but not everybody will accept his kingship. You can be God.
But why would Yeshua then allow the sacrifice to happen?
You have to answer this question. That's why the
I don't
research
want
is
to ask the story.
You have to look for yourself.
Makes no sense, Uncle Bams. Absolutely. Makes no sense. The whole point of this is, again, you've got to look at this, and what we do is we kick this around from every angle. And once you have all of your data, once we have all of this, you can try and link. If all of this is past, and we're looking at this. Where do we fit in? How do we fit in? Is it literal? Is it figurative? And again, I don't expect you to solve it, but I expect you to kind of come up with some sort of answer. And remember, please, you can study this out your ears, you can look at commentary out of ears, but if you don't pray and ask God to show you stuff, remember, the Ruach HaKodesh is there to teach you. Yeshua is the consummate teacher. God is the one who taught the disciples. We have access to that. Pray. Ask him to help you understand something if you don't. It might not happen immediately, it might take a bit of time, but he might show you something that's going to cement in your heart what this is about. Don't be scared to ask God. He's there for you. This is an extremely complex topic. It involves many different books and many different ideas. All right? Kick it around from all angles, from the Jewish perspective, from the Christian perspective, from the end time revelations perspective, New Jerusalem versus Jerusalem, New Temple or Third Temple versus millennial. Can we find any evidence biblically to support either? One thing we pretty much know for sure is that these two temples are very unlike, in high probability, they're not the same. Like I said, we just don't have enough space in Jerusalem at the moment to do that. They're going to use Temple Mount. It's the only thing they're waiting for. Unless someone decides they're going to build this out in the Negev or the Judean wilderness, and then they're going to just start flattening as much as they possibly can. But the problem is, every Jew understands that Temple Mount is the place where their temple stood.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to move it. Because it's always been.
Unless the complex runs into it. But again, you still have to have access to be able to build that.
Yeah.
Lots of difficult interpretation here, guys. All right?
So now you say it can't be in Jerusalem, but the Mount of Olives is in Jerusalem. And if Messiah is coming in through the Golden Gate.
Zechariah talks about him standing on the Mount of Olives and it's splitting in two. Is that where you're going to put your temple?
That's what I don't understand.
Well, have you studied Zechariah 11 and 12?
Why?
So then how then are you going to come up with an answer 5 minutes how well fishy?
I just have one thing. Could it be in the heavenly?
Revelations 21 and 22. There is no temple. Have you studied Revelations 21 and 22?
It's saying, it talks about a prince. It talks about a prince coming to make offerings as well. You've got to look into that as well. Exactly.
Exactly. All right.
There's lots to take into account.
Guys, this is a very complex thing. Like I said, take your time, kick it around. Don't leave this until I get back. Don't worry, Uncle Vince is going to explain it. No, I'm not.
We're going to be parting in Israel.
You're going to be sitting here and I'm going to go unpack. What did you find in Zechariah? Let's parallel Zechariah 11 and 12 or Zechariah 2 with what you've seen in Ezekiel 40 to 48. And I'm going to tell you how does that apply to us when we look at Revelations.
Can we hide behind closed words?
You can.
Understanding part.
It's difficult to understand right away.
We would never understand fully.
No, that's just so awesome. That you can just know something.
Would that still hold even millennium reign? Will we understand everything in the millennium reign?
Well, I'm hoping so, because then at that time we will be teaching the nations. If I understand scripture correctly, the dead in Christ will be raised first and we will be judges over everybody else.
Yes.
So we better know what we're talking about. Otherwise, how are we going to teach the nations how to worship? Which is going to bring you back to the kingdom of priests in 1 Peter 2. But that also is a remez from Sinai. So you're not going to get away from that until you look at the covenant with Sinai. You've got to unpack this, and you've got to do yourself a favor, write down measurements, write down point, write down descriptions, and cross references against others and see which pieces match up to it. Okay? All right. Prayer time is happy time. Vanessa. You pray. Make that bread. Look, you have lots to say. We're going to share. Pray for us.
Father God, I come to you, Sheriff's name. I thank you for the day you've given us, and I thank you for sharing your word with us and helping reveal scriptures. Father, I ask that you, if it be in your will, that you reveal to us the millennial reign and Ezekiels Temple. And any understanding, if we're ready to receive answers, if I ask that you give it to us. And I pray you be with everyone, and you be with us when we go to Israel, and you be with those who we leave behind, and you protect us, and you protect those we love. And be sure.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.